Hi, my name is Shripal Mehta, and I'm with Dolby Laboratories, developing our new API platform at Dolby.io. I'm really glad to be able to speak at Mile High Video. Wish it was in person, but I look forward to seeing many of you sometime soon. I wanted to name this talk Forget Video, Let's Talk About Audio, but I thought that might be a little bit too aggressive. So instead, I thought we could talk about what's hidden inside your audio and why it's valuable. Several years ago, we were working with the Golden State Warriors basketball team on some audio experiments. We wanted to better understand how audio is captured and how to create a more compelling, immersive mix. In a live broadcast, you have all of the mics in the arena coming into a broadcast mixing console. The mixer takes all of those mics and composes them into a full audio scene. They then manage that scene live during the game to create a consistent level experience for listeners at home. So what we wanted to do was understand what's actually happening in the arena, not what's happening after it goes through that audio mixer. So we took a pair of mics that were capturing the ambience in the stadium and plotted the loudness over time. And you could start to see some patterns in the data. Once you start looking at when different parts of the audio were created, you start to see some patterns. So you can see here in the first quarter, the crowd was energized. The Warriors were probably doing great. Things were great in the game, and it all started to go downhill. And now, if you look at each quarter and you plot the average loudness of that quarter over time, you start to see almost a 6 dB drop in loudness between the first quarter and the fourth quarter. You can see that the crowd energy was not that great. And you can imagine the fans were thinking the same thing at home. So what would you do with that information if you had more detailed audio analytics? How could it affect how you would change your programming? How could it change how you would deliver ads? Audio matters, and there's a lot to glean from how the design and quality of audio affects presentation and engagement. A joint study was done between the University of Southern California and the Australian National University on the effects of audio on credibility. They took a scientific podcast and created two versions, one with the original audio and one with degraded, bandwidth-limited, noisy audio. They then sent that to two listener pools, and they found that the cohort that listened to the degraded audio had less trust in the information being presented than the pool that listened to the high-quality audio. So, it's not just comfort and engagement that's impacted by audio. It goes even deeper than that. There's a lot of work going on looking at video and image features to gain deeper understanding into a piece of content. And there's just as much work trying to get some insights and understanding from audio as well. Audio is complicated, it's rich, and tells you a lot of really interesting things about your content. So what I wanted to do was talk you through a framework for how to think about audio analytics. We've been thinking about audio analytics in terms of three major buckets. The first bucket is the quality of the audio. Audio quality is key to many aspects of the content creation and delivery, and is what most are used to seeing when it comes to audio analytics. Here are some example features that you may look for when assessing audio quality. The one that's nearest and dearest to our hearts is loudness. It's important to have the right loudness to create a consistent listener experience from program to program and program to ad. It's also useful to know whether there's any clipping or distortion in the audio for audio intelligibility and comfort. You may want to know whether there's any background noise in the audio, how much, and what type of noise is present. And the bandwidth of the audio, whether it's telephone quality or wideband audio, will tell you whether the content was recorded correctly. Lastly, you may want to know whether there's unwanted silent gaps in the content. And these analytics have the following business value. Many of these features are necessary to assess whether your content is compliant with delivery specs. They're also useful for general quality control to make sure assets are ready for delivery. And some of these measures, like assessing clipping and assessing noise can affect engagement and comfort, so they're absolutely worth knowing as well. The second category of audio analytics are scene-based metrics. Understanding the different audio scenes, how they relate to the overall story, and what signals those scenes tell you about the content are absolutely valuable in understanding your content. For example, you could think of a podcast as a single audio asset. But when you start to break it down, there are a lot of different audio scenes and events. And each of those scenes and events may have different audio characteristics that are worth understanding for engagement. So for example, a music introduction within a podcast is typically well-recorded, well-mastered content. Advertisements within a podcast may have variable quality, and more importantly, they have variable loudness, which affects presentation. A host within a podcast tends to have a pretty good recording setup, but they may have more subtle problems like sibilance, those harsh S sounds you hear in some audio. When you get to the interview, you have a really complex audio scene where one talker may be well recorded, like the host, and the other talker or talkers may be on a low-quality video conference bridge or a phone line. And so you have this ping-ponging between high-quality audio and poor-quality audio. And if that interview was at the heart of the podcast, that bad audio will definitely affect the listener's willingness to stay through that podcast. So knowing these different features within the content and correlating that with engagement and drop-off can tell you a lot about how to measure and grow your content. You also see these patterns over most types of content. Every audio recording, even a single dialogue stem, has some next level detail in that audio that's worth assessing for one reason or another. So the way we think about audio scenes at the most basic level are to break them down into when there's music, when there's speech, and when there are other sounds that are neither music nor speech. This aligns with the way content's created today. Audio mixers think of audio in terms of dialogue, music, and effects or other sounds. And we can see that dialogue, music, and effects in the final mix within the finished content that we all receive and deliver. When we look at the value of those scenes, they can help you with rights management. A common problem that I'm hearing these days is about the takedown of short-form content because the audio was licensed for its original intention, maybe to be played back in a venue or played back in a festival where the audio was recorded. But that music was not licensed for streaming. And so content owners want to know if there's music in their content that they should not be putting to air. Audio analytics can also help you get the mood of the content, the scene-based metadata, and help you understand pace and provide you with new metadata to enrich your content. So to show you an example of this, what we did was we analyzed the first season of The Mandalorian, minus the second episode because there was a bug in our system, and we assessed it for speech presence and music presence. Each row is an episode. Each square is a minute of time, and the intensity of the square tells you what percentage of that minute had either speech or music. You can start to see some macro level trends about how dialogue drives the narrative in the first half of each episode, and music drives the narrative in the second half of each episode. And there's more to glean, like that there's almost 10 minutes of music underpinning the action near the end of the season finale. So as you can get the scene-based metadata, you can start to see the patterns either within one asset or as a big data system across many assets to start to understand the patterns within the noise of your data. The last category of audio analytics are audio sounds. The specific sounds within your content tell you a lot about your assets. Some example types of sounds are environmental sounds like wind, traffic, rain. And you also have sound events like a car horn or a door slam. And lastly, you may have some speech-related sounds like mouth clicks, sighs, and groans. And all of these different types of sounds are useful as metadata to figure out what you want to assess with your content. You can use this metadata for all types of purposes. You may want to do it from a rights point of view, whether you have rights to have a certain actor within a piece of content, looking at it from the quality of a capture, and creating metadata. One thing when I was talking to a post house was they wanted to know whether there was a helicopter flying overhead or some car sounds within a dialogue capture, because that meant that dialogue capture was not useful to use. Another example was a few years ago, I was talking to an audio mixer who was working in golf, and they had synthetically put bird sounds into a tournament because the audio of that event was so sparse and quiet. The network started to get complaints from viewers because the birds that they had chosen weren't indigenous to the area the tournament was being held. So being able to correlate audio to other details of your content can prove to be very valuable in thinking about the overall engagement of that asset. There are many ways to classify sounds, and machine learning has proven to be an amazing tool to getting more specific and more precise with the sounds that are in the audio. One key thing to note here, though, is that one person's noise is another person's signal. So going back to that last example, a lot of audio mixers want to know when there's sighs and groans and breath sounds within audio because they use that as filler within their content. But to some other folks, those are absolutely unwanted sounds within a piece of audio. So being able to know when they are and when you need to use them is super key to delivering great content. So to close this out, look inside your audio. It'll tell you something you may not have ever seen before, and help you extract even more value from your content. Thanks for listening. If you have any questions, find me in the chat here for Mile High Video, or reach out to me on Twitter or LinkedIn. Thanks.